Hey, thanks for joining me on Anxiety Ave. This is Gypsy, and if you're not already doing so, you can go ahead and follow me on Instagram at Gypsy Vibe, and you can subscribe here on this channel as well to keep in touch with me. So in today's part of the story, we're going to fast forward to my teenage years, and this stuff, it's not really like an incidental thing that I'm going to be telling you. It's more like a vibe thing I'm going to be telling you, just a description of the entire overall atmosphere at home since all of these traumatic things had happened to us up until now. So at this point, I feel that it is important to note that under normal circumstances, people who had dealt with the things that we had gone through, like if we had like regular doctor's visits and people knew about this stuff, they would have highly recommended us for therapy. They would have told us that we need to go to counseling and work out some of the issues that were inevitably going to come up because of the traumas that we had dealt with and the really scary circumstances that we had escaped to get us to where we were in New York. That's what should have happened, but that's not what happened at all. And other than our usual, yearly checkups for school and immunizations, that was the only times we were ever even near medical professionals. So my mom's very like anti-doctors, and she wasn't the kind of person that like if she saw you stressed out or like in some type of distress, her first reaction is not go see a doctor. That's like, no, her first reaction is here's some home remedy that I conjured up from whatever my imagination. Here, try it. That's her go-to, right? So anyway, my mother's personality was becoming more and more, I think, to be really honest, I think that she herself was dealing with a lot of emotional distress. And when you're in denial about a lot of your issues, it makes it so much harder to process them because you don't have a real explanation for why things are happening to you or why you feel the way that you feel. You just won't let yourself internalize things. So it's harder for you to come to grips with your problem and work it out. How can you fix a problem when you won't admit there is one? That's kind of where I think her mindset was at that time. And she built up this huge level of distrust for males. Just in general, my mom looks at men like they are beneath her. She looks at them like they're only useful for like their hands. They're only useful for what they can physically do for you. But you cannot trust them when it comes to business. You can't trust them with parenting. You can't trust them with your secrets. She doesn't look at males as people who she can 100% trust. She doesn't 100% trust anyone, to be honest, but definitely not men. The people who she trusts the most, which is really only like maybe 40% more than she trusts the average guy, which is 0, happen to be females, So, but she doesn't just, I don't know, she's just not that trusting of a person anymore. She wasn't. So she started to develop this distrust for men and kind of tried to like drill that into me and my sister's heads that we can't trust any men or rely on them for anything and nothing important. And if it's not something you can control, then you cannot trust a male with that. That was like a huge theme in our household. And while she was raising us, she didn't date any other guys seriously, like not to the point where they were living together. The closest she came to that was this guy who she met, who was like, I guess, this Jamaican guy that she ended up marrying. At first, when she told us we were married, we didn't even believe her. We were like, oh yeah, okay, mom, you're married. Good for you and your husband. And she's like, no, look at my ring. And we're like, oh, wow, what a pretty ring that anyone can buy at a store and wear and say it's a wedding ring. Wow, that's awesome. And we were like always like being sarcastic with her about it because we really thought she was playing, but she wasn't. She really married him. So yeah, but when they got married, they didn't have their own place. So like, wait, how did I get to this part of the conversation? I don't know. But anyway, so that's what she would do. Like she would like have him around, but we didn't really like live with him. I don't know. Anyway, so that's the closest she came to dating somebody and living with them around us. But eventually she did end up moving in with him, but that was like after me and my sister were already out of the home. And that's what I was trying to get to, was that life at home with my mom was so much chaos. Like it was constant bickering, arguing, fighting, misunderstanding. And I don't even know over what. Like, what could you possibly be talking to your 13, 14-year-old kids about that warrants this level of explosiveness in your communications with them almost daily? Like, what is happening? What are you talking to your children about? You know, I really don't know what it was, but it was like every single day she was scolding us about something. And a lot of the times it would be because she thought that we did something that we didn't really do, but she would just think that our intention was whatever she thought it was, and then that would be her reason for like attacking and just accusing us of stuff and just freaking out when we would like come home from school. So me and my sister would spend a lot of time outside the house, as much as possible. My mother eventually ended up getting a job working for like a Korean hair shop. Wow, how cliche. Like if her shift wasn't over yet, by the time we'd be home from school, we were out. Like we left immediately. And we were always good with our schoolwork. So we would do all our homework at school before we even left for the day, because we had no resources at home. Like we we didn't have, I don't think we went to the library. I don't think so. Like later on when I was in high school, I started going to the library, but we didn't really know the library system that way. Like we didn't really know about the library. So that wasn't really a resource that we used. And then we didn't have access to a computer, internet, books. Like we didn't really like have access to anything. So when we weren't at school, we were just on our own and had to go off of the top of our heads and whatever textbooks we had at home. Anything other than that, like I remember we used to get these assignments at school where the teacher would say to write reports on current events by watching the news. And this was when they were trying to like heavy duty incorporate technology into schoolwork. So their way of doing this was to tell you to watch the news. And I couldn't do those assignments because I didn't have a TV. We didn't have cable. We didn't have the news. We didn't watch TV, you know, and my mom wasn't about to go buy cable so we could do our homework. Like we had the basics. We didn't even have a phone in our house for the longest. You know what I'm saying? We'd have to get resourceful and do those kinds of assignments some other way. And the way that we did that was to do as much of the schoolwork as possible at school, where we had access to computers and library books, and paper, loose leaf paper, like just basic school supplies. We didn't have any of that stuff at home. So we do most of it at school, and then the things that we like really had to find a resource for, we would go over to our friends' houses to try to like use their resources to do it. Like I'll watch news at my friend's house because they have TV and cable and all that, or like at church. But if those options weren't available, we just wasn't doing them assignments. And I would tell the teachers, like I would raise my hand. I'd be like, what if you don't have cable at your house? Yeah, okay, but what if you don't have a computer at your house? All right, but what if you don't have access to this stuff? And I would be like, straight up have an attitude with my teachers, like, this is discrimination, man. We're at a different level of poverty, okay? You can't do this. So I will always be like saying something about it. But because my grades were so high from the work that I did do, I could afford to miss like projects and certain things that I just didn't have the resources for. I could afford to not do those things. And another thing I would do is when we'd had group projects, I would always volunteer to be the spokesperson of the group, because nobody wants to do the public speaking part. So because I knew I couldn't say, come to my house, I can provide my home as a study area. I have a library card, so I can provide books for, resources. I couldn't do any of that stuff. So because I couldn't do that, and half the time I wasn't even allowed to go anywhere, even for like school projects, my mother wouldn't let me go over to people's houses to work on school stuff with them because she was so paranoid that we were going to get kidnapped or something. So so yeah, when I would go and work on this stuff at school with my classmates, I would just be like, all right, feed me all the information. I'll help you guys with the artwork. I'll do like the project board. I can do the artwork for that. But the presentation itself, I'll get up in front of the class and talk, so you guys can just relax and chill. And my presentation is going to be the bulk of our grade anyways, so leave it to me, and I would always come through, So that was the role that I would play at school, trying to figure out how I could use the little small bit of resources that we had to be functional with people. And like, me and my sister used to share our clothes. We were like two totally different sizes, and now I'm probably fatter than my sister is. But back then, she was the chubby one, I was the bone skinny one. So there was a huge difference in our sizes. But I don't know, man. My sister was an expert at squeezing her body parts into the clothes and like making it look good on herself. Like, she's like a fashion genius. So she would somehow just make it work. And like, I didn't really wear a lot of her clothes because I didn't like the style of the clothes that she picked, but she would wear a lot of my clothes, and we like share our clothes because we didn't have money like that to just go school shopping all the time. So a lot of our stuff was like hand-me-downs from people from church. They would like wear stuff, couldn't fit it, and give it to my mom. And like, my mom's body type is a little bit bigger than the average. Not bigger, she's small, but she's like wider, like more thick, so she can't fit into the clothes that Korean women wear. But like me, I was like a skinny, real thin teenager, so I could fit those clothes, so I would wear them. Yeah, so it was a lot of that going on, and just a lot of bickering and fighting with my mother that started to really feed into my beginnings of my anxiety disorder. Is from hearing my mom screeching in my ear nonstop. It got to the point where I was begging her to spank us. I was like, can you just hit us and get it over with? At least then it's done. Like, the bruises will go away. I ain't gonna tell. I would rather have a beating than this torturous lecture, I don't want to hear it. And she would go on and on and on, and the kinds of things that she would get upset with, like, for example, right, if we didn't wash the dishes, just say, I'm mad at you because you didn't wash the dishes. Please wash the dishes. I'm upset with you for that. I'm going to punish you for that. Give me a lecture for 2 hours about why I don't wash dishes because I'm so lazy. Instead, it would be like, it would start with the dishes that would trigger it, and then it would somehow transform into a critique of our entire personalities. Like, she'd be like, you didn't wash those dishes because you think you're entitled to shit. Oh, you think you're entitled to shit because you're just like your dad. Your dad used to be like this, and he would say like that, and he would do like that, and he'd drive me nuts, and you guys must be exactly like him. Why am I cursed to have to deal with... Oh my God, what does this have to do with the dishes? For 3 hours, she would just go on and on and on about how selfish I am because I don't want to do the dishes right. While she's yelling, she's also washing the dishes herself. So I'm like, well, what? Let me do the dishes. Let me do them then. No, you can't do it. You're not going to do it right. Blah, 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 blah. And then she just keep talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. Now you guys see why I just tune her out a lot of times when she's talking to me on the phone. That tone that she takes when she's yeah, like that, it's like the tone itself just triggers me, and I just can't even deal with it. Like, it used to make me have really bad anxiety attack, but now, because I learned to tune it out, I just feel uncomfortable. But like, because I'm tuning it out, I guess I get through it, but I don't like it, sometimes I'll just be on the phone like, when is she gonna stop talking? And half the time she's not scolding me, she's just like telling me a story about something that happened to her today, but it just has that tone, and I'm like, I don't care, like, I don't want to hear this. Or she'll relay a story about someone else who she yelled at about something, but she'll tell me as if I'm the person she's yelling at to like make it real, I guess. I don't know. But it's just like, that's too triggering. You need to back off. But that's where it started, from listening to her just yap all the time for hours and hours, every single time we would do something wrong. And like, she's so big on critiquing entire portions of your personality and not just teaching you better habits. You know what I'm saying? It's like she's trying to make you change your entire mindset when she's correcting you. And that makes it so difficult to deal with as a teenager, because you're like, I have my own mind. I'm my own person. I have my own experiences. I have my own beliefs. I don't need you to give me a lecture about what you think I should believe because you just want it to be that way. Like, no, that's not gonna happen. I really try not to do that with my kids, but it's like a conscious thing. I have to like tell myself as I'm talking to them not to say things that remind me of the things that my mother would say. Like, that's the best I can do. Don't repeat those same mistakes. So in that mindset, when I eventually met who became my son's dad, I wasn't thinking about like the consequences, I guess, of dating that young. I was 16 when I met him, and I was about 13 or 14 when we moved to Gypsie. So in that 2-year span of time, I was fed up. Like, I was just tired of it, you know? I remember one time we had a teacher that came to our house initially to explain to my mother why we had gotten in trouble for something at school. Actually, we weren't in trouble. Someone else did something to us, and we didn't want to go home and tell my mom about it because we knew that if she found out that the school had gotten involved to resolve the issue, she would flip out on us. So we were like begging our teacher not to send her the incident report, basically. But the woman, she was like the vice principal of the school, I think, or she might have been the principal. She insisted on just going to our house with us and telling her face to face because she didn't want us to get in trouble. My gosh. When that lady came over to our house, like, by the time it was over and done with, everyone was in tears. Everybody was just snot like flying all over the house because this lady had never experienced anything like this. Like, she was just like, why are you so angry at your daughters? Like, my mom was flipping out on us, like yelling at us, screaming at us, just shouting at the top of her lungs, like we had dishonored her so much. And the lady was like, do you not understand? They didn't do anything wrong. Like, someone else did something to them, and I'm trying to explain to you, those kids are in trouble, and I have to give you a report. I have to let you know it happened. That's all this is. Like, they didn't do anything. She just was flipping out, saying that, you know, we could have avoided the situation, all this stuff. She was blaming us whatever way she could. And I think in her mind, she thought correcting us was going to make her seem like she was a good parent in front of this lady. I don't know. That was her logic. But instead, it made her alarmed. And she was like, this is not fucking normal. What's going on? And from that point on, this woman, the principal of the school, like, dubbed herself our godmother and was like, just forget it. Any problems from these girls, send them to me. Like, I don't even want you disciplining them because you're traumatizing them and they're scared to talk to you. This is not healthy. This is not how you communicate with your kids. And she was like, no, any problems, send them to me. I will take care of it. Just leave them alone. And like, she was crying. She felt so bad for us. And she like became like one of my mentors after that. And that was great. But I mean, goodness, like, that was a real reaction that we got from an educational professional, okay? So you can imagine what it must have been like with nobody intervening all the time with my mom. It was just constant battles. And like, she won't let you leave. Like, if we would try to like leave the house to cool down, she wouldn't let us leave. She would block the door physically with her body and refuse to let us out of the house. So we were just stuck there listening to her, just going on and on and on, and like fighting with you, like as if the world is coming to an end every single time. So I don't know, maybe she was taking out some of her anger from my dad and these con men that she allowed into her life on us, maybe. Or maybe she was not really over Nor, the crazy guy who was stalking us and molesting us. because she would say little things sometimes that would almost make it seem like she was trying to negate our accusations, almost like we imagined that he was doing something to us or that we made it up. And she wouldn't acknowledge that we were telling her the truth. And that really sent a huge rift between us and her. So it was like a me and my sister against my mom kind of atmosphere a lot of times at home. But then that also kind of turned my sister into my security blanket, because I only felt secure when she was around me, and I didn't like being in new places or around new people without my sister around. And almost like I feel like the kind of bond that I had with my sister can only be explained by comparing it to the way twins bond with each other, like identical twins. And me and my sister would have this running like joke where we would say that we're really the same soul in two different bodies, because we were so in sync with each other that it felt that way. It really did feel like that. And like everything I couldn't do, she could. And the things that she wasn't good at, I was. So we would balance each other out. It's crazy, right? But that's really the kind of bond that we had. And in some ways we still do, but it's just not as strong as it was back then because of the way that our relationship kind of deteriorated over the years. But like it's getting better, but I don't know that it's ever going to be that same way as it was before then. That was probably the deepest our bond was then. For me, like my whole world was my sister, you know. That's like the only constant I knew I could rely on at that time. And even though me and my sister would fight all the time too, just I don't know, just something about like when me and her would fight, it wouldn't feel like it was the end of the world. It didn't feel like this is it. This is the last fight we're gonna get into, and we're not gonna talk to each other and not be friends anymore. It never felt that way. It always just felt like it's just this one thing that we can't work out, and we're just flipping out, and then it'll be fine, you know. But because some of the fights were violent, that was my whole issue, was that it was like a lot of violence in my household. It felt like growing up with the domestic violence, and then me and my sister fighting with each other all the time, and then my mom, even though she didn't hit us, the rage that she would show when she would get upset was equal to the kind of rage that you hear about people exhibiting just before they murder someone, assault someone, shoot someone. You know, that's the level of rage that my mother would get to. She just wouldn't get physically violent. It was really volatile in our household. Like it was so unpredictable. You never knew what was going to happen, and it wasn't unusual or surprising that the day would end with someone having an explosive lash out at someone else in the house. But we were like, you know, very close at the same time. It's so weird. You know, people will critique me when I say that, like, you can't always judge people that are physically violent or do violating things to other people on face value. You do have to factor in to some degree their backgrounds, because it makes your judgment very twisted when you're in situations where you have to handle things on your own. You revert back to the things that you saw growing up. So a lot of people that do these kinds of things, it's not even malicious. They're not even like literally trying to hurt you. They don't know what they're doing. They don't understand that there's such a serious consequence to their behavior, because the rage and the emotion blinds them. It just takes over their mind. They're not even thinking straight when they're doing these things. They're just in a different place mentally. So until they snap out of it, and then they're like, oh, what did I do? Wow. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's very normal for people who actually turn out to become abusive people. And I don't say this because I'm like, give them sympathy. No, that's not what it is. I'm saying if you understand what makes people tick, then you can prevent it. You can do things to not feed into that when you are given the opportunity. So if you yourself have children, then you know, okay, I picked up some habits, or my kids' parents, their other parent has these habits that they picked up from their life as children. I don't want my children to grow into those kinds of adults. So let me equip them now while they're young to learn how to manage their anger, their emotions, you know, how to communicate with people. It's this hands-on approach that you can take so that you can produce better citizens to go out into the world to mingle with the next, generation set of kids. It's about just making our communities a little bit better and easier to navigate if we understand why people behave the way they behave. That's why psychology is so important, because if you don't understand how the mind works, if you don't understand how a mind can break, how can you fix it? How can you make things better? By just damning it and saying, well, you're a lost cause because, oh, well, because you killed someone. People kill people for all sorts of reasons. They don't all deserve to have the same consequence. There are people that like me, I was going to murder people because I needed to protect myself and my sister. And in that moment, I really felt that was necessary to do. And there was no other way out. That's how I felt at that time. Does that justify me actually doing that? No, it doesn't justify it. But you can understand why these kinds of tragic situations may occur, and the consequence of a person who's in that situation, which there are. I'm someone who thankfully didn't have to do that. But what about the people that didn't have that way out? What about the people that really were stuck? They're still in our judicial system, just rotting away in the court system now. There are many examples that I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there are people that have been in those situations where they went through with it. They actually did the murder. They actually did the fighting back, the shooting back, the hitting back, whatever they did. The explanation for why that happened had to do with what was going on in their lives at that time. It wasn't just because they were trying to hurt someone. That's what I'm trying to say. Self-defense type of a thing. You got to kind of understand where people are coming from. And even if it's just like to avoid it, you got to understand where certain people are coming from. Like if damage from their childhood is causing a person to act in a very negative way, you can find a way to distance yourself from that person until they're able to like get things together better. My mom is an example. Like before, when I didn't try to understand her and I came at her from the standpoint of, you're just a bad mom, you just don't care about me, we had a very horrible relationship. But then as years went on, I started to study psychology more and try to understand better where people's mindset is when they do certain things. I realized, yeah, she doesn't even know half the time when she's doing these hurtful things. She doesn't even realize she's doing it. She just picked it up from somewhere and kind of conditioned herself to act a certain way as a defense mechanism. So when she does this stuff, I don't take it personal. I just I just pretend it didn't happen. And because it's not going to affect my life this way or that way because I call her out, all it's going to do is just make us argue, and it's not necessary. So that has prevented me and my mom from arguing with each other for the longest, like so many years I've gone not arguing with her, even though I still don't like half the things that she does, what she stands for, her approach, the way she talks to people, the way she talks to me. I still don't like a lot of those things, but I can tolerate having a conversation with her and not have an entire nervous breakdown because I'm so affected by the things that she's saying to me when we have these conversations. I prefer for it to be that way. If I can't have a genuine relationship with her, then whatever relationship I want to believe that we are simulating, I want it to be a positive one rather than something negative, because I got to deal with you anyway. You're my mom, So that was like the experience pretty much when we were living in Poughkeepsie with her. And that's also part of what drove me to look for a way out of being in her care, because I felt very trapped. I felt very misunderstood, and I could not be myself. I felt like I had to pretend like I was playing this role of the daughter she wants me to be when I was home. And it was driving me insane. Like I felt like I was just trapped in my own mind. So I had to get away, and just the conflicts alone was just too much. And so then when I started to date my first serious boyfriend, he was 8 years older than me, already had 2 kids, already grown out of the house situation. I think an opportunity had came up for me and him to go get an apartment together. So I didn't even think twice about it. I just did it. Like there was nothing to think about in my mind. I gotta get the hell away from my mom was how I felt. And at that point, my sister, who was younger than me, she had already kind of like unofficially moved out. because she had a boyfriend too who was like 15 years older than her, and basically like living with that guy unofficially before I had even officially moved out. So both of us were just like done. Like we were just so done with the stress at home. And this kind of is what I was talking about in one of my previous videos, where I was talking to the teenagers who feel trapped at home, giving you guys advice on how you might be able to get out of the situations that you're in. And I was saying that leaving home with a boyfriend or girlfriend as your first resort is not necessarily a good thing if you're not really ready to take care of yourself, and that partner is not ready to be on their own. Even though this guy was 8 years older than me, he was immensely irresponsible. And I was so caught up in the romance part of our relationship that I didn't realize how irresponsible he was. And that really made things difficult for us down the line. And that's not even talking about his personality issues that ultimately, broke us up. But just the level of immaturity that I had to deal with was outrageous, and when you're young, you're not thinking about all that stuff. You're not thinking about the practical side of things. Your mind is just, especially girls, I don't know how it is for boys, but for girls, we're very caught up in our fantasies of what we wish life was, of what we think, it should be, what TV tells us, which is like, you're a princess and he's your prince and he's gonna save you because you're a damsel in distress. That's nonsense. That's not real life. And like, you don't realize that when you're young and people are pursuing you, you don't realize that, because that's how guys come at you. They'll come at you with this whole, oh, I will save you from your life type of deal. And so you'll believe that. And I'm not saying that that isn't possible. It is, but it has to be with the right kind of person who is able to sustain themselves. If the person can't even take care of themselves properly, how are they going to take care of you? That doesn't even make sense. But as a child at 16, 17, you don't realize that. So you're just like living in your own world and you think you know what you're doing, but it can cause you a lot of harm. And from that relationship, I ended up having a child out of wedlock that I was totally not prepared for. And thankfully, when my son was like 3 or 4 years old, I met who I'm with now, who ended up being an excellent step parent for him. I was just blessed to run into that situation on my own. I don't know how my son would have turned out, because I didn't know what I was doing. And at that time, he was going down the road of becoming a menace to society because I didn't know how to discipline him. These are things that you have to think about when you're planning your moves. So that is the conclusion of the part of my backstory describing my emotional state and my relationship status with my mother. And it was just volatile. I'll think of stories here and there where I'll just do like a story time type of thing with specific incidents for you guys. But like I said in the beginning of this video, this was just to give you like an idea of the atmosphere that I was in. Yeah, but that's it for today for this video, and I guess I'll see you guys again next time on Anxiety Ave. Go ahead and follow me at Gypsy Vibe on Instagram, and you can connect with me over there. A little bit easier than here on YouTube, but I definitely do appreciate you guys stopping by, and I hope you will stick around to watch the next video that gets uploaded. Check out my playlist, and I'll talk to you later. Adios.